We'll get started. All right.
Okay.
Well, hi there, Kirk here. Thanks once again for joining me at Pastor's Positive Mental Health Institute. I'm excited to talk to Ethan here, and I'm excited for you to hear from him as we just look at how we can work together to build one another up in love so that the church can flourish and will flourish, and we can be a light to the world and actually do what God called us to do, and that is to go make disciples and baptize them and teaching them to obey all that He has commanded as we are ambassadors for Him going into the world. So if you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. And so without much delay, let's get into this. Ethan, is it Matott? Is that how you pronounce that?
Nice. Most people do not get that. Well
Oh,
done. Yeah.
whew, I passed. I'm excited to have with Red Rocks Church in Austin, Texas. Most of us, if you're like me, who was in music for years, you think Red Rocks, worship, Colorado. And
Yep.
so, but here you are in Austin, Texas, doing really great things. But before we get into the church and what's happening there, I just want to hear from you and kind of tell us your story. What got you into pastoral ministry?
Yeah. Great question. I had no intention of ever working in ministry. My goal was to work for ESPN.
Nice.
And I went to CU Boulder for school in Colorado
Nice.
and was studying broadcast journalism and was headed on a trajectory within that. And halfway through college, God grabbed hold of my life and redirected everything. And so that begins a long story, but put my faith in Jesus and had some experiences in our college ministry in Boulder as well as in the mission field that started to just be transformative and give me a different view of maybe what my future could entail, and was certainly the last guy that anyone would have thought would be a pastor in my friend group and people at the college ministry I went to. But after school, my two best buddies and I, who I now lead this church with here in Austin, we jumped on a plane and spent a year traveling in the mission field. And it was in that year that I think I really felt the call to vocational ministry. And when I returned back to the US, kind of knew that's where I wanted to be with a broadcast journalism degree and a year of mission work under my belt. And there was a church in Denver that was hiring an associate missions pastor position that I had a connection to. And so I spent 4 years as a missions pastor there. And then we ended up planting a church here in Austin. There's a whole story behind that. Starting in 2019 out of our home base in Denver, Colorado, Red Rocks Church. And so it's been quite a journey, but that's the very short version of a very unexpected career and life.
Yeah, and it's a great story. So, were you on Lead Time or was it American Reformation? I can't remember which one.
American Reformation, yeah.
Yeah, so American Reformation podcast with Tim Ullman. If you want to hear the story, it's really fascinating and really exciting, and you just see how God works and in unexpected ways. I mean, the Apostle Paul, who used to be Saul, no one thought he would be the Apostle Paul. So
Sure.
I'm not saying I'm not putting you up there with him, but I'm just saying, God shifts
Oh,
things.
no.
It's
He
good.
uses the unlikely,
Yeah, yeah.
but the willing, and that's all I've ever been, is willing while not qualified. So
Right, right. I always look at myself and said, well, he spoke through a donkey. So,
yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about the church in Austin, what your current role is, and just how you can kind of talk about, where it was, where it is now. And so just however much you want to share, tell us about it.
Yeah, there's three of us that pastor together. I would be the executive pastor type role. So I'm kind of operational, oversee a lot of our staff, make stuff happen, and then teach about once a month. We rotate preaching as well. So I get to do a lot of different things and help, our ministries grow and help people get connected into our church. And there's business side to those things and the fun of finance and things like that. But we have a really unique situation having our home base in Colorado, that we have a team mentality. So we operate with a lot of autonomy down here. We preach live, we operate our budget, we hire our staff, but we have oversight from our guys up in Denver, which is really, really helpful. And we get to share resources and vision and DNA with an incredible team in a church that, started when I was in high school in Colorado. So we got adopted into a vision that wasn't even our own. And the decision to plant a Red Rocks church was, it's been kind of an experiment because there's campuses in our Denver area that all operate together, but we hadn't planted an actual church in another city that was going to operate as a church in its own city with capacity to grow. So there's been a lot of figuring out over the past 6 years. We moved down here in 2018 and started doing pre-launch services, and then officially launched the church at the beginning of 2019, which was historically a terrible time to launch a
Right.
church.
Right.
Yeah, we moved into a new space after a year of setup teardown and got to leave our stuff set up basically with a new lease. And that first service was March 1st, 2020.
Uh,
And we were so excited, and then thought we had kind of like arrived a little bit at least. And then 2 weeks later, COVID hit. So it was a very humbling time, but we came out the other side and people came back and new people showed up. So it's been fun watching our church grow here while getting to be a part of a bigger story of the Red Rocks Church family.
yeah. Yeah, so it's fascinating to see how God. Now you mentioned something. It's not on the questions I gave you, but that's normal for me.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about DNA, church DNA, and I have a good friend who is a church multiplier. We'll call him that in Northern California, and they've been planting churches. And we were talking about planting in a certain area several years ago. I'm like, I'm not sure that DNA will work in this part of the country.
Right.
And so how do you because obviously Austin's got a little bit different than Denver. So how did you take though, what of the DNA that was happening and has happened and continues to happen in Denver, what were you able to, how did that transfer to Austin? And what adjustments did you have to make maybe?
Yeah, I think at first, the first answer is that's why we ended up in Austin. Actually, we were all planning to go to Southern California. My two buddies and I had all lived out there and just kind of always felt like that's where we would want to end up. And in the process of deciding where we were going to plant a Red Rocks Church, our senior pastor in Denver, Sean, advised us. He's like, go to a couple different cities and spy the land out, but think of it in terms of our church and where will our culture and DNA really thrive. Red Rocks Church is very much a church for people that don't go to church, very unchurched church, a church for the prodigal. We always have said we throw parties for prodigals. We're building a front porch to welcome prodigals home. And when we were in Austin, it felt as though none of us had been here before. So we're just here trying barbecue, like driving around, seeing the city. And it felt like if Denver and Boulder, where we come from, had a baby in Texas, it would be Austin. Austin is a very interesting city in terms of growth right now, but also in demographics of being such a kind of the city where in the South, if you grew up in Bible Belt, faith, legalism, whatever, you get away from all that by going to Austin. Austin's a city where you don't go to church because that's just what you do. You aren't a Christian just because that's cultural. And it's a very rebellious city in some ways. It's a city that felt like there is a whole pocket of a ton of people that are seeking spiritually, but they're not seeking Jesus right now to be reached. But also there's this massive population of prodigals, people who have faith roots, a little bit of that Jesus haunt in them, but they walked away from church for whatever reason. And we want to welcome them home and bring them back from the pig trough, so to speak, to the front porch and throw a party for them. So I think the DNA and culture really clicked for Austin, that the way that it has thrived in Denver, there's a lot of similarities, but there are differences in Austin. We have such a heavy, for example, New Age population here of people in New Age spirituality, which is a mix of a whole lot of things. I call it smoothie faith, where you're just mixing together kind of anything you like and calling it whatever your beliefs are. And that's true in Denver, but Austin's maybe like a hub for it. And so we've had to preach to that more and kind of dismantle some of that theology and where people are at and what they're actually seeking and how that's actually in Christ and not all of these kind of broken ways that the world is throwing at them. So there's an adjustment in kind of the audience that we speak to and some of the topics that we feel like maybe are more topical in Austin than maybe they are up in Denver, while sharing in the same think tank of how do we communicate these things. But overall, culturally, I think Austin and Denver are similar cities, and that's why we felt like this was the place to be.
Yeah, and I think what you said is really important, that when we talk about the DNA of a church, it's really the core principles, our core mission, or what we're trying to create. And how we do that is going to be determined by context. But I love churches that use some of that language, the DNA of the church, because that makes you go, this is who we are. You know,
Right.
and so that helps everyone who's there to go, okay, this is who we are as a church. And so does everything filter through that? Not that there aren't great things that we could do in ministry, that, but if they don't fit in that, then it's not staying in the identity of who you are as a church. And so
Yeah.
I find that that's really valuable, but also I would say sometimes a challenge, because you've got to go, wait a second, let's just remain who we are, and let God worry about that. And so with that, so your
Mm.
church plant in 2019, 2020 happens, and so you're rebounding, I'm assuming now. Hopefully most of us are rebounding. I was
Yeah.
at our church actually grew during COVID.
Mm.
Weird. And
That's
not that
awesome.
we didn't follow protocols. It was just interesting. I don't
Yeah.
know,
It's
whatever.
great.
Um, Nothing that we did. We didn't know what we were doing during COVID. So,
Nobody knew what they were doing.
right. So no strategies. But over the
Yeah.
years, how have you relied upon the church members of your church?
Well, when you launch a church, volunteers are the reason you survive.
Mm.
That's we had probably 40 to 50 people, I'd estimate, that moved here with us from
Wow.
Colorado and California to get jobs and not work at the church, like, plant families here and call Austin home to help this church happen. And so that was the lifeblood of everything from our pre-launch services to the day we launched. And it still is. Our volunteers and group leaders and the people who devote themselves to the mission and make so much more possible than a small staff ever could. It's always been my answer when people say, obviously God is the reason why our church is where it's at. But the second reason is our volunteers, is just the church body that believes in it and builds it with us. And I could tell stories all day about the amazing ways people have stepped up and built with us and sacrificed so much.
Yeah. Well, let's hear one of those stories, because sometimes we get a little down in ministry. You seem like a pretty upbeat guy, so maybe you don't.
Oh, thank you.
But I mean, you're Southern California and Denver; those are pretty chill, happy people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
So, but how have you been? Can you tell me about a time where you were just really blessed or built up in the ministry by something somebody did in the church?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, 3 months-ish into our church plant, this guy came up to me in his, early 20s, tattoos everywhere, funny guy who'd been coming around church, and I'd kind of been wondering the whole time, like, what does this guy think about all of this? And he said, "Hey man, I noticed that when I show up for church, there's not really any plan in the parking lot, and there's not that many spots at this building. Do you want me to help with that?" And whenever you have somebody who sees a need, but they don't just complain to you about it, they go, "I'll be the solution." You're like, praise God for you.
Yeah.
So he became the captain of the parking team. And all he did, he would stand out in that parking lot, and every young college age guy he saw, he'd go, "Hey man, you're joining my team. We need help in the parking lot." So and that became like this brotherhood of
Yeah.
these guys in their 20s that would stand out in the Texas heat and welcome people in. And he started building leaders there. It was the person who saw a problem and created a solution. And he kept doing that to the point that now he's on our staff, and he was in the corporate world, like just starting his career, successful. And one day, finally, we had the conversation. I was like, "Dude, you're so good at building systems and leaders. Would you come work at the church and help us with your mentality of solving problems and equipping people and building people up?" And he's one of the best leaders that I know, and we get to have him on our team now. And it all started with a guy who was kind of just checking the church out and decided to volunteer.
Yeah. So, any church member that's listening to this or watching this, hear what Ethan just said. If you see something, that means maybe God is asking you to be the solution for it. It's funny.
Yeah.
I've always had moments where people have complained about certain things. One time I had people kind of complain about children in church and stuff like that. And I said, well, maybe you can offer to help and take them to this other room that we have set up for that, meet the parents, and their answer is, well, I'll just keep praying. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Somebody will be the answered prayer. At the first church I worked at, one of the pastors there, he had the funniest story of this guy who for some reason just wouldn't stop complaining about the carpet in the church. Like the carpet bothered him so much, just like the church in the book of Acts, people were just hung up on that kind of stuff. But this guy was complaining about it, and he said, "Well, what would you like? Like what this guy had, like, I think it would look better with this and whatever." And he said, "Okay, you know what? I think you're right. And I'll just send you the invoice when they put the new carpet in." And the guy was like, "Wait, what do you mean?" he said, well, if this is something you're so passionate about, I'm sure you would be willing to back it. And of course, the guy said a similar, like, well, I'll pray about it,
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, it's always funny when anyway, never mind. We can get sidetracked for a long time
yeah,
on that.
sure.
So over the years, what have you found to be the most challenging aspect of ministry?
That's a funny question. So I have done this exercise with our staff a few times where I'll go around and everyone will share something that's really draining them and something that's filling them with life. And nearly every single answer, every time, both answers are people.
Yeah.
I think the most difficult part is people. It's, people that come in with church hurt and baggage, and suddenly now we're the punching bag for that, or we're the thing that's going to trigger that in them. You get a lot of complaints and critiques as a pastor, and it's always from people who are hurt in some way, people who are processing in some way, but it weighs on you for sure. Sometimes I feel the apathy of people where we have a mission and I feel this urgency and I feel like I can't shake people awake to that. And so that's a very negative take on church people. But I think that there is that element in all of us that you see all the way back in the grumbling Israelites in the desert, wandering and complaining and saying, we should just go back to Egypt, right? Like those kinds of mentalities. But on the flip side, to answer the next question probably is people are the best part of it. It's why you do what you do. We are here to reach people and see Jesus save their lives and bring them into his kingdom and then disciple them and help them to walk out the calling that he has on their life. And so it's always both, the answer to both. People are the most difficult part and they're the best part of it all.
Yeah, and I think that to speak to that, what you're saying is that this is why pastors and church workers go into the work that they do, is because we care about people.
Yes.
And you mentioned the Israelites. Moses wasn't happy with them all the time,
Right.
and so and that's something we have to struggle with. Yet he also interceded for them all
Yes.
the time, and so
Yes.
it's one of those challenges that we have. But also, when we have these challenges, and it's the number one answer in all the podcasts that I've been doing is that people, and that's a hard thing I think for us to say. At least for me, it is, because I'm like, wait, I love people.
Right.
I have a passion for people. There's an urgency, like you said, for people to know Jesus and to be saved and to share their faith with others, because we have a world that's dying and without Christ. And that should weigh heavy on our hearts. And we're wanting people to be made whole. As you talk about people coming who are hurting, and especially in your context with people who have been de-churched or have bad experiences with the church, or maybe never even stepped foot into a church. What am I getting into? There's different challenges that come up with that. And that can be frustrating at times. But maybe as you've dealt with some people and had some challenges with people, how have you seen other church members help you meet those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, starting with small groups, I think is just this amazing place where you see leaders step up and they sit with people in some of that tension. They'll help them process through not just quitting on church because there's something they don't like or something that triggered past hurt or whatever it is. I think that we've watched a lot of our people come alongside us and meet with people and sit down with people and pray for people and encourage people and make them feel at home. I always use this analogy that when I was in high school, my best friend Robbie's parents' basement was our home. Like me and my buddies were there all the time. It's where we lived. And there came a point at which we would be there and our buddy Robbie wasn't even there. Like it was his house, but we'd just be hanging out and his parents didn't think twice about it. It was for all of us. And we were party kids, so we kind of destroyed their basement for a while. But I now feel an ownership in that house where it feels like that's my house too. And if someone were to come over to their house, I would make them feel welcome and bring them in to be part of that family. And I'm not blood related to them. And I feel that ownership in a lot of our people here, that they don't walk in here waiting for one of us pastors to make someone feel at home. From the parking lot to a small group, they feel like this is my home too. And I want to make you feel welcome. And we really have always preached that through our volunteers, not to them, but through them. I think that the second someone drives onto our property until the second they leave, we want them to feel like it's not just a couple people trying to make this happen or get them obligated into giving to a church or whatever, but that we are a family that wants them in this home. And it's way more the volunteers that are at the cafe or greeting people at the front doors than one of us on the stage. When I read a bunch of Google reviews of churches in Austin, just trying to find out who was where and put them on a map, I saw more reviews that had to do with whether someone was noticed and someone said hi to them than about theology or preaching or worship.
Right.
It was so much more about the relationship of the family. And so that's the most important part. And you can't do that without posting people up everywhere to bring people in and make them feel part of a family and a home, not just attending a church service.
Yeah, and that's a really good word about small groups and people connecting at a level of what I would say safety and vulnerability. So if you're in a small group and you have trusted people, that those are the ones who will walk you through the
Yeah.
times because the pastors aren't always available. I know that's hard for everyone to hear that we're not always available, but
Yeah.
but we need the whole church. I mean,
Yes.
we're a piece of it as pastors, but we need people to actually have those conversations and those relationships with others that we just can't. We just don't have the time nor
Yeah.
the footprint to do that. So
Not always available, and also not always the best person to do it. Like I'm 35 years old, and so there's certain conversations that have started that I've gone, hey, I'm going to defer you to this amazing couple that's been married for 40 years because they have more wisdom than I do. I might be one of the pastors at this church, but I go to them for advice, and I think you should too. And so I think having leaders who see themselves an extension of leadership, of being voices into helping disciple people. There's people that are gifted in different ways than we are and more equipped in certain ways. So it's very helpful when you have people that have that mentality and want to partner with you in that discipleship process.
wow, did everyone hear that? 35 and humble enough to say, hey, I'm not the best person for this.
For nearly nothing. I'm really good at talking about fantasy football. I would put myself up there. I can talk to you about that all day. But yes, there's a lot of things I need other people to help lead others in.
But that's a good word for pastors. We always, a lot of times we carry the weight to say, I have to have the answer for everyone. I have to be the only one that can do this. And especially in smaller churches, that can happen. And I think it's really important for pastors to recognize their limitations, their giftings, and also look for those people who might be a better option for others. And that's part of your job is, hey, how about you talk to this couple or this person because they have a better background in it than I do.
Yes.
And so that's a good word of wisdom. So at age 35, wow, good job. No, praise the Lord, really, right? So, so can you tell me about how someone at your church made you smile within the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. I love that. We have, a ton of those stories. I met with a lady yesterday who's about to share her testimony on our baptism weekend. We record people's stories and edit them. So some people's stories are up on screen and then they get baptized in the room. And just met with a lady who was so passionate about her faith. And she's 45 and has kind of lived the first chunk of her life going through a lot of different stuff and come out the other side so passionate about her faith and wanting to share her testimony in the most authentic and helpful way she can of the good, bad, and ugly. And just getting to sit with her, honestly, and be like, our church is a small part of that story, but hear her passion for the gospel, I think brought a smile to my face to see someone who wants so badly to help others find the freedom that she was longing and looking for a couple of decades. And so those testimonies, those stories always just bring the biggest smile to my face because I feel like my job as a pastor is often just being a guy who opens up the doors and watches God work. Like I get the front row seat. I get to third wheel the best moments of people's lives, like their weddings or their baptism, their salvation moment, a breakthrough moment. And so you can't help but feel joy of the Lord in those moments, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned something important though. You are looking for those moments because often, so I'm assuming you sat down with some sort of interview for the video. Is that what you were doing with her?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, we can look at that as a task. I got to complete, I got to do this and move on to the next, and it's got to get edited rather than pausing and going, wait a second. We're hearing eternity happen in a person's life right now. And this is why we do what we do. And I think it's easy for pastors to get to the place where I just got to click, I got to check the next box, I got to go on to the next thing. And it's important for us, is why I asked that question to even when I'm not on podcasts, if pastor's talking to me and they're struggling a little bit, I said, hey, tell me how someone's made you smile in the last 2 weeks, because we don't pause to go, oh, there was this one, and then there was this other one. And you sit there and go, okay, wait a second. My life, I do get a lot of personal satisfaction. That would be the first thing in positive mental health scale. Anyway, but I do get some personal satisfaction in this. And actually, I do feel like I'm doing my job. And okay, not everything is overwhelming or negative, and the problem is we just have not taken the time. I had one friend of mine say, Jesus was the only one. I'm misquoting him, but that's fine. Jesus was the only one who could carry the weight of the sin of the whole world, and our access to news 24/7 has made us feel like we have to carry the weight. And we as pastors, we have to carry the weight of everyone in the church. That's the Lord's job. Our job is to come alongside and to minister and to help, and not carry that weight, because we will be crushed under it. Okay, last question here. What's the desire for the people at your church? What's your desire for them?
Well, one of the things we say is we want people to know God, live on purpose, and go change the world. And I think that can sound cool on posters or whatever in the lobby, right? But I actually really, really want that so badly for people. I want someone to walk in here who's far from God or feels far from God, who once knew him or never has, to know him first and foremost, to have a relationship with him. And I know that that's probably a very obvious answer of salvation, people coming to know Jesus, but from there, everything flows. And then to get people the ability to see that God crafted them and created them uniquely for his purposes in their life that lead to changing the world around them, whether that's one person or it's a country or whatever. Truly want that for people, because I've gotten to experience it in my own life as a guy who at 19 was filled with shame and felt like God was done with me and there's no way he could like me, because I knew better than walking away and being that younger prodigal son. That's my testimony. So I know those feelings of kind of like, oh, I've gone too far and done too much. I don't think God has much for me. And I just want to shake people out of that and help them see that like when scripture says you're a new creation, that's actually true. And when it says you're forgiven, that's actually true. And when it says you're called to a life that's different and unique and not easy, but so purposeful for bringing the kingdom here, that's true for you. And the moments I get to see someone come alive at not the other side of that journey, because we're always in process, but where they've been building this thriving relationship with Jesus, and they're starting to see their life is impacting other people, that their friend that they were bringing is the one getting baptized now, when a year ago they were the one getting baptized. Those kinds of moments are what I live for, and love to get to witness so many of them through what God is doing in our church.
Yeah, I know you kind of mentioned, it's the same thing. Everybody wants this for the church, but what's fun to listen to is how that plays out in different contexts. Because I think every pastor, right, and every church has that same mission. We're going to make disciples, and we're going to go into all the world and make disciples, right? I mean, that's the idea. But yet how we approach that is so unique to each context. It's really fun to listen to. And so I just really appreciate your passion for it, and how good. If someone wanted to check you out or get a hold of you guys there, or they're in the Austin area or even the Denver area, what's the best way for them to do that?
I mean, in the social media world, you could follow Red Rocks Austin and Red Rocks Church on Instagram. Our church, Red Rocks Austin, is kind of just on the north side of the city. So check out our website, redrocksaustin.com. Come to a service. And we also have a podcast called Afterthoughts that we do every week. And it's the three of us pastors, and sometimes we have guests on. And sometimes we're talking through a message and diving deeper into what we were preaching on the weekend and having conversations surrounding it. Sometimes we're inviting people in to speak to different topics. And that's been a really fun project that we've been doing for a little over a year now. So our sermons and podcasts and all that stuff's on YouTube at Red Rocks Austin. And
Great. I'll put all that
people to plug in whatever way.
Yeah, I'll put all that information in the comment section. It's funny because we asked that question, and I mean the reality is we'll just Google it, right? I mean, or ask Siri, they'll tell you how to get a hold of you. But I never assume that people are going to use that technology, and it's good to hear it and go, okay, I got to remember that. So
you got to make things easy for people. But there have been so many times where someone's new to church, and I go, "How did you find our church? How'd you hear about it?" Google. Yeah. I just Googled churches, So technology can help us. It can bring people to us.
Yeah, get those SEO settings correct, right? So that you go right to the top of the search. Anyway, I just know that terminology. I don't know how to do it. So I just know there's something
it's a rabbit hole that you have more important things to worry about.
Right. I was building a website years ago for the church. I had planted a church, and So I'm reading all this, and I had to hide, words in the background. I have made the same color as the background so you couldn't see it. So the optimization was there. I'm like, this is stupid. Anyway, so
Forget this. Hey, can I ask you one question?
sure.
You've been doing this. You said 25 years you were a pastor. You've been a pastor.
A little over that, yeah. In the pastoral world, either
Okay.
assistant or senior, yeah.
So what would be some of your biggest wisdom for a guy who's been doing this for a decade in ministry that has a lot of questions? And like I said, I'm 35. There's a lot of things I don't know and a lot of things I want to grow in and get better at. Give me some wisdom.
This isn't going to be rocket science. I think the biggest thing is there's twofold. Uh, work really hard. That's great. But have fun. I think
Mm,
ministry is supposed to be fun. Enjoy relationships with people in your church that are fun. We
mm,
can be very serious about things because, right, the kingdom work is serious work. But one of the things I think that we miss a little bit in the life of Jesus is he hung out with these 12 guys. And you
yeah.
know that he wasn't teaching them like literally, he was teaching them because he's the greatest example of all, but he wasn't like just always like, hey, I want you to write this down. I want you to learn this. I think they
Right.
hung out and had a good time. In fact, Jesus was accused of hanging out and having a good time with people. And
That's why the
so
Pharisees didn't like him.
right, exactly. And so I find that,
Yeah.
man, there's so much, man, God is so good that he's called us to do this work. And there's some days I sit there and go, man, I actually make a living doing what I love. And I love hanging out with people. And like you said, that watching people in those normal conversations where the light bulb comes on and laughing with people. Yeah, you have a lot of sorrows with people and a lot of tragedies, but we have the hope of the resurrected Christ. And so, even in the midst of that, we can have great joy. And so for me, it's always been that, hey, have fun in what you're doing, because the life of the Christian, I think Christian life is the most joyous and exciting and fun life. And if we as pastors aren't having that fun, then what gospel are we preaching? Uh,
Yeah.
so
No,
anyway,
I
that's
love that.
probably not great advice, but that's all I gave you. I got right now.
I did. No, I think that's profound advice because I do think that it's so easy to take yourself, take ministry, take everything too seriously,
Yeah.
and feel like that's noble. But I love that point that Jesus, a lot of people rejected Jesus for his joy
Right.
and the fun he was having. They
Yeah.
didn't like that about him. They didn't think he was holy because he was happy. Like
Right. Right.
that
Right.
is, it's a missing piece for a lot of Christians. And I think the world needs to see joy-filled people who are actually having fun,
Right.
living their faith out. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, because I think that's actually a very undertold piece of advice.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty simple and I'm kind of a goofy guy, and I'm not very serious all the time. My poor wife,
Well,
when we've been married 33 years now, and one of the things that used to bug her when we
wow.
first got married was that we'd be in a serious, intense conversation, dare I say, an argument. And then I couldn't handle it, so I'd make a joke. I mean, and she's like, "What is your problem?" I said, "Life's too." I said, "I can't. It's too. I have to have fun, And
Have
so,
to.
and she
Yep.
learned that
Sometimes.
there's value to that, I suppose. But anyway,
Oh, that's good.
so
Man, that's awesome. Okay, now I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hijack your podcast, but I have another question for you.
yeah, sure, go for it.
Um, you've been married for how many years did you just say? 30
33.
something? Okay. Having a family in ministry is a very unique life. So give me some wisdom there. I have two boys that I would love for them to not grow up and hate the church.
Yeah. No, it's tough. I was in a context for a while where I was probably at the church 60 to 80 hours a week.
Mm,
The kids were at the church the whole time. I have one son who is a senior pastor at a church in El Paso right now.
wow.
He's 31, 30 years, turned 30.
Cool.
I credit that to not only the Lord, but the wife he married. She's pretty amazing. Ministry mindset. Our daughter, who's a
Cool.
hospital administrator, her husband is in full-time ministry and she serves at the church. And so that's just really exciting. Our oldest son and his wife, they love the Lord. And so, it's one of those things where you pray a lot. But I think I would say this. To me, this is the best thing. they have to be, and my kids weren't all the time, so I need to clarify this, but they have to be more important than the ministry, and they need to know that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, one thing that was modeled by my parents is that the God I worship on Sunday is actually involved in our lives all throughout the week. And so do they get the same dad on Sunday mornings that they get the rest of the week? And so that was something that was modeled for me. My dad and mom God was just part of our lives. I mean, yeah, we went to church on Sundays and Wednesdays and Sunday nights, and I was back in the day when he went all the time. And
Yeah.
but yet God was normative in our life. I can't think of a day in my life where I didn't know that God was real. And that my parents had joy in Jesus all the time. Not perfect. I won't say they're perfect, but we had a family that just worshiped God, not just on Sundays. And then my dad, and then I think that for us, if we can be the same person to our kids anytime they see us, just because Sunday's is Sunday and you have something to do on Sunday that's a little more public. Can you be the same? And actually back to my having fun thing, have fun with your kids, and value them. Let them know that it's important to let them know that serving Jesus Christ and loving the Lord your God with all your heart is the most important thing. But how does that flow out of your life? And again, and then my wife, I was working so hard going to school when our kids were young, and she just had this deep pressure and desire to raise kids in the way of the Lord. And so, a quick story: our middle kid is a pastor now. He got in trouble for something. He must have been 6, I think, at this point in time. And so gets sent to his room. He's gonna get his mom's gonna talk to him, and he's probably gonna get spanked for this one, which he didn't care about that. So and so my wife goes back there. She's got her Bible. We have this one Bible. Then she's got all these verses on the inside that have to do with certain types of misbehaviors and stuff. And he says to her, I think he's 6 or 7 years old. He says, "Mom, can I just have the spanking and not the sermon?"
That's awesome.
And she says, "Well, you're going to get a longer sermon and you're going to get both." So,
Yep.
but I really credit my kids' walk with the Lord to her investment. I mean, she took seriously her job as a mom to raise them. And then I got to come home and support that too, obviously. And so, it's not easy, but kids, man, we're blessed. Our kids, I don't think we've done anything perfect at all or anything great. God's been gracious. And I mean, how old you have kids, right?
2 boys, 5
Okay.
and about to be 2.
Okay. So you're going to come to a fun age, by the way, fun
Very
stuff. And so enjoy them and you've heard this before, they grow really fast. But one of the things that's awesome is that my kids are not just my kids now, they're my friends. And I just love, we love hanging out with our kids. And our kids invite us for stuff to hang out. I wish they were closer. And so, I think that being real with them too, you're not perfect. You're going to blow it sometimes. But again, I think that consistency, who is dad in the public, who is dad at home, are they the same person? I find that extremely valuable. And on that note, I found that a huge problem in church leadership. And a lot of the kids that hate the church is because they were ignored and they saw a different man at the church than they did at home. And so they're like, this is fake. I mean, that's really what they think, that this is a charade. It's not real. So just being genuine and real all the time.
Yeah.
That's a long answer to your question. So
that's great. Thank you. I'll take all of that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, good stuff. Any more questions?
I'll leave you there. Those were 2 big ones, but that was good wisdom. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no. So Ethan, thanks so much. God bless the work that you guys are doing in Austin. I just appreciate your heart for making your church a porch for people to come hang out on and to celebrate and learn about Jesus, and at a safe place for people to actually explore something that has been foreign to them but missing in their lives, and as the enemy had a hold on them, the Holy Spirit draws them there, and you get to be part of that work in their lives, and it's such a great joy. So thank you all for listening, and again, if you like, please like, share, subscribe. You can always check out the work that I do at Pastors Positive Mental Health Institute, ppmhi.org. Reach out to me. Love to talk with you. If you have any other questions, I'm here for you. So again, Ethan, thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.